Lovely.
Here we
Hello,
go.
Martin.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm okay.
I got my
We've already
kebab
said
pillow
hello,
here.
haven't we?
I got this really embarrassing kebab pillow here right
I was
behind me.
looking at that. What is it? What is the pattern on that?
It's a kebab.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
one of my friends got it for my birthday this year. So, yeah.
Well, like I can remember when I used to tour Europe a lot. The best kebabs are always your neck of the woods.
Absolutely,
Without a
absolutely, no
doubt.
comparison, no
Holland
comparison.
may have had an edge on Germany though. Holland, there was one venue I used to play with IQ, and there was a kebab place right outside. I can't remember. It was absolutely beautiful. They used to put this like red powder on the kebabs. You don't get
Yeah,
that.
that's common. That's chili powder. It's very common here.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't get that in the UK. They don't have
UK kebabs are dangerous for the. I've had some questionable experiences with those.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things in the UK like that. You see,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things like that. We throw caution to the wind in many areas. Now all this health and safety is coming. It's no fun anymore. You know, the kebab is the last bastion of danger, really, here in the UK.
We
So,
live
so
dangerously.
Martin,
Yeah.
before we get chatting, tell us what you've been up to. You've been gigging and playing. You've had an album out, so tell us how that's all gone.
Yeah, it's been going great. It's been probably the busiest year of my life so far. This year I've had a new signature guitar. I've put out my first book, did my first tour with my session band, put a record out. Yeah, it's been crazy. And in the past few months, I've been busy making new videos with the Martin Miller session band featuring Mateus Asato. We have a couple of videos coming out with him. Then we did a 2 week tour. That was fantastic. And now things are finally slowing down, and I'm trying to get back into the creative zone, try to get all the accounting and all that stuff out of the way so I can finally slow down and write some new music.
That's the problem with this game. If you really want to nail it at the level you're nailing at, it's there's so much work. And in the old days, the record companies were doing that. I mean, they were obviously shafting you because they were doing it, but they were doing all that. But
Yeah.
you're trying to operate like a record label, tour promoter, tour manager, a video filmmaker. It's all that at the
M-
same time. It's incredible.
mixing, production, all that stuff. But I kind of like it that way. I like to keep creative control to a fault for sure, because I know I would be putting out more stuff if I allowed myself to, trust other people more. But that's just how I'm wired. For me, it's funny for me. It's like the Yngwie Malmsteen interview with Rick Beato that came out recently, and I kind of related to with him to a point about, well, it's like you're a painter, right? You're painting a picture, and for me, playing the guitar is one part of completing a painting, right? But mixing is another, and singing is another. And I don't even see it as doing different things. For me, it's just I'm making a product. I'm completing a picture, and I do whatever it takes. And whether that's twisting a knob on a mixer or
Mm.
strumming guitar strings, it's not so different for me. And I find it strange that somebody that I would work on something for months at a time, and then somebody with a completely different vision would come and move the faders around. It's like changing the colors of the picture. It's just, it doesn't it I since I'm a one man operation, that philosophy never really gelled with me so much.
Well, I'm very similar. I when I was working in the prog bands, I got frustrated because of having to work in a band because and you realize that everybody in that band they had their sort of autocratic view of how things should be, and that's where when it was all going well in the early days you all sort of uh, decide to put that aside because of the success you're having. But once you've got that any sort of success, then everyone wants to put their vision in on it. And the problem I have with people, you'd probably hate working with me, is I'm really attached to the subconscious, so I want to mind stuff like it's sort of that Miles Davis bitches brew in a silent way thing. I want to put the musicians in a place where they're not in control. I like to have musicians where they don't know what they're doing, so they start to play in a way that they haven't predetermined,
Hmm.
and a lot of these like a lot of these uber guitarists like you and Tom Quayle and all, Matteo Mancuso, Alex Hutchins, all these incredible players out there. I would love for them to get in a room with a good bass player, good drummer, and make an album up on the spot. I want to hear what that's like. I want to hear what you sound like when you capture that thing of suddenly, oh, well, we don't know where we're at now, but this is something else. I love that. I love the super control. Your album's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Everything is just been sculpted for beauty, you know, and I love that. And your solos are magnificent on it. But I also want to hear you in another realm. And I can remember when I came to see you with Tom Quayle and you did that sort of improvisation. That was entirely improvised, wasn't it? You were just off on a tangent there. And I loved it. I was like spiritually lifted up by that. I thought, you know, you're virtuoso guitarists, but there's a something else there. Don't you ever want to just hire a really great bass player and drummer and just go into a room and make an album?
There was a time when I was hugely into that sort of thing. And actually, I made a record 11 years ago. It's still out there somewhere on either YouTube or Spotify, I'm sure. It's called Tom Götze Band Bass Shuttle. And that is a quartet record. So it's with a tenor saxophone player. Yeah. It's a bit like the classic Mike Stern setup. And those tunes were all recorded live in the studio and highly improvised. So I did that sort of thing. I just feel like in that world, and obviously I also do this stuff with Tom Quayle, and even the session band is oftentimes very off the cuff, depending on who we have as a guest. Like when we play with Paul Gilbert, it's just utter chaos, right? Because you cannot put Paul Gilbert in a cage and tell him what the arrangement is. The guy just wants to play. He is like that. So we follow him, whereas he's carrying us around he's carrying us through the ring. And I love doing these things, and they're kind of the opposite of what I do with my own music and my record. But I feel like in a guitar trio setting, I'm not sure I would have anything original to say. Quite honestly, I don't. I think that format has been exhausted for me to a degree. At least I'm not creative enough to think of something that I could do with that hasn't been done better before.
I think talking to you, I'm starting to realize that it's you're a bit like Steve Vai in that you're not really a guitar player, you're a composer, and you have a composer's mind, and you play composer's guitar. So you're trying to create stuff which the guitar is part of what you do. It's not the only part of what you do, and that's why you need control. And I think if you have a composer's mind, you do need control. That's the whole thing. All composition in that way is dictatorial, because you'll have a vision that you're trying to realize, and then there's another end of that, which is the sort of jazz thing where that's not happening. And I think the real genius that ties those two things together is Duke Ellington, because Duke Ellington was able to create high level compositions that utilize the musicians in the band as players, which is something that you do with the session band, isn't it? You know, I'm sure you try and exert as much control as you can, but when you have someone like Paul Gilbert come in, you're not creating an arrangement for a guitarist, you're creating an arrangement for Paul Gilbert. And if he wants to go where he wants to go, then the composition is that sort of wired into for me, that is a type of composition. But I do understand where you're coming from, you know. So going back to, because I really want to pick your brains about this. I loved that Yngwie Malmsteen interview with Rick Beato, because Yngwie can come off a bit pompous, and more recently I've noticed he hasn't been, and I really warmed to him as a guy. I got a lot more of where he's coming from. I didn't know whether he respected Rick a little bit. So
I think that was the key in why he came off so gentle, and which is really unusual for him. I feel like he was really sympathetic in that interview, and I think it's because of the respect he had for Rick, for sure. I mean, that guy is a monolith in the music industry right now, right? He's one of the most.
Oh God, he's the grand wizard of YouTubers, isn't he? He's our Lord and Master. And I do believe you actually met him a few days ago.
Yes, we got to hang. It was fantastic. Yeah, lots of wisdom was shared to me. So I was very grateful for that.
Tell us all about it, Martin. Go on.
Oh, some of that is not for the public. Some of that is not for the public.
No, he didn't tell you about his horrendous drug habit, did he?
No, it was actually.
Rick hasn't got a horrendous drug. That was a joke.
I know, I know. We don't need disclaimers for that. Uh, I felt like it was a very his event took place in a church. It was very inspiring, actually. Like he did a song breakdown, yes, but mostly was basically his personal story, kind of his life story, how he came to be, how he started the channel, and how his family was involved in all of that, how his environment, his societal background
Mm.
played into all that. And it was a very positive, family orientated message that he put across. It was really interesting to see that side of the of him.
I'd love to meet him. And you did mention me to him. I hope you did, didn't you? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We did discuss your videos. Yeah, he's a fan. He's a
I
fan.
can't believe it.
Hmm.
Oh, that warms the cockles of my heart. That does, to know that.
And he said he subscribed to you. So
He hasn't.
yeah.
If he'd have subscribed for me, it would have said, when you log into
No,
your,
you can conceal that. There's
you
ways
can
to conceal that.
conceal it. So he has
Mhm.
subscribed.
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably he's got
He said
in
that to me.
mind.
He's a man of his word.
I think that there's something about his actual guitar playing. That's the key with Rick, isn't it? Is that he's extremely knowledgeable. He's got a brilliant attitude to YouTube. When I started watching him, especially his live streams, I thought, well, these are quite chaotic, and he doesn't care. He's just got a camera up. There's no real production values, and that inspired me. My it's not like yours. Yours are like, Cecil B. DeMille, aren't they? But mine's so sort of lo-fi, and I was inspired by Rick to do that. But you feel that he has got a deep knowledge of the guitar and harmony, and he's also got a deep knowledge of rock music and commercial. So very rare to have somebody like that, and it's a testament to the ability to so many of these producers that you come across in the old music industry. I know loads of old guys like this. They're like proper rockers, and they've been played in all sorts of bands. And then when you sit down and chat to them, you find out they're classically trained and they can do orchestral arrangement, and they've studied modern classical music. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
like Rick has done everything that you can do in music, right? He studied like classical, I think upright bass or whatever.
Yeah, that was right.
Then he
Yeah.
studied jazz guitar. Then he became a producer, and then now he's a YouTuber. He's held every position you can possibly have in the music world, and I think that's what gives him this point of authority that he can speak from, is because he's been there. He's lived through all that he's talking about, right? It's first-hand experience.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a certain approach, which nobody really discusses, but he's got a real likable. So you don't feel like he's talking down to you because he's so knowledgeable. He seems like a regular guy, and I think there's a magic touch there. Um, your channel is doing very well. Have you hit the million yet? You've got a little bit to go to the million
No,
subscribers.
760,000 or so.
That's incredible.
The subscribers slowed down a little bit. It was like was at a high point during the pandemic, obviously, so it's slows down. There's a bit of ways to go, but I'm okay with that. And it's funny because I don't even consider myself much of a YouTuber to begin with, because I don't really do YouTube content like you and Rick do. And I'm sometimes a little bit jealous of that, because I feel like people expect me to always deliver like these super high produced, high polished products. And whenever I don't, it's like nobody watches it. So I don't know if you feel like this sometimes, but sometimes I feel like I'm a captive of my own YouTube channel. Like
Oh, without a doubt,
the
yeah.
YouTube channel demands me to do the thing, and I don't have creative control over it to the extent that I would like. Like, what? I would like to turn on the camera and moan a little bit about the Rolling Stones top 250 guitarist lists, but if I did that, everybody would leave the sinking ship.
Well, the way I see it is that I think I've got grades of viewers, right? And
Mhm.
so if John McLaughlin or Rick Beato are watching a video, that's 2 views, but they're two pretty cool views. And I was
Yeah.
aware of this in the music industry. It's not just numbers; it's who's listening. And I would rather have a conscientious, intelligent, smaller audience that really appreciate what you're doing and get what you're doing. So I imagine there's a core audience there for you that would love that stuff if you did it. But the trouble is YouTube sits there going, what are you doing? Doesn't it? It literally tells you, what are you doing?
Yeah, but
what are you doing this video for? Get back to the old stuff.
Yeah, my 12% Brazilian audience would be like, what's he doing now? It's like, I don't want any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, like, these two people that really matter, because there's also this thing about showing up to a live event. First of all, the Beato event was sold out. I've heard of people who couldn't get tickets. I think that's fantastic. And second of all, I've met a handful of people at that show through my connection with Rick that I'm now still in touch with, and that could have like a significant impact on my career. So it's yeah. Sometimes you need to reach that one person.
Yeah, well, you know what my advice is on this, and you're much more successful YouTuber, so you can probably chuck it out the window. But the way I see it is, I deliver without fail a certain amount of videos. I'm sure with your production values, you're delivering far less videos than me. I do 4 regular videos a week. I do 3 in the week about music, and then a philosophy one on a Sunday, and I stick to that. So if I want to do anything outside of that, I just make sure it's on top of what I'm doing. And I think what happens then is that it still adds views to the overall YouTube thing. And I think because I was really worried about this, because I started to put my music up on YouTube. I was making these little videos for my own songs, and I was putting up, and then as opposed to getting like 5 to 10,000 views, they were doing like 200 views, and I was going, oh my god, am I going to kill my channel? But I held it, and those views, it's like when I started my channel, it was like a separate thing, and they started going up, not to nowhere near. But then suddenly I started to see the sales on Bandcamp, and I thought, well, I'm in the end, you're like me. If I could press a button, I would like to be able to go in my recording studio and make music and stick it out, and for that to pay for me to exist. That would be the dream. And I feel I'm very close to that with YouTube, but YouTube's not quite like that. And that's the thing that's really frustrating, because I'm sure with you if you put your own music out there, it's not the same as doing a tune by the Eagles or Queen or something, isn't it? You do feel trapped to,
It's a funnel, right? It's a funnel. You have 10,000 people watching the cover, and 10% of those will give you a minute of their time to check out your original music, and another 10% of those will actually fully engage with it. So you have to have 10,000 fans to have the 10 hardcore fans.
Yeah, and I think if you're aware of that, it stopped, because there is a slight panic doing this, isn't there? That it could suddenly all go.
Oh man, I mean, Rick Beato talked about this at his event. He sees like a cycle of the life of a YouTube channel, and somewhere like huge name YouTube channels that now that do a nosedive after 7 odd years. And it's very interesting that you say you have to keep feeding your YouTube channel these regular videos, because if I overfeed my YouTube channel, I saturate my own market. I feel like if I put out too many of those videos, people lose interest in them. So I gotta keep people hungry.
Mine's not like that. It's bonkers. I mean, my video is like an hour long. It's just me talking, and for some reason, if I'd let it drop, I think I'm getting by on actually relatively quite low views, but they're high quality ones, so everyone watches the whole video, and there's a lot
high retention.
Yeah, and I think that's what keeps. And so, and I think what happens with mine is that when people come to my channel, there's 500 videos there, so they get lost, and so they go, well, I better subscribe.
I've done that. I've been down that rabbit hole. Like I remember cleaning this room, listening to you debate yourself about who's the greatest drummer of all time.
It frightens me, because I feel like I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't plan to do this. I sit there and talk to the camera, and a lot of my stuff's tongue in cheek. To me, I feel like I'm chatting down the pub to my mates about music. That's what I'm trying to do. And us musicians do. It's like what we're doing now. You do get philosophical, because I think we're all scratching an itch, aren't we? As us musicians, you get bogged down in technique and all this type of stuff, but really, there's something you're trying to express, isn't there, underneath it all? And I think that turns us all into little philosophers because we have to deal with that for the whole of our lives, you know. And that's the thing that never gets spoken about, you know. One of the things that stuck in my mind when I came to see your thing with Tom Quayle
Mm.
is Tom was saying he's a real he's got a real shapes mind. It seems he can look at the chord progression and he said to me, I could just look at it and play through any chord progression.
Yeah.
And when he was saying that, I was thinking, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing when I play through chord progressions. You know, and I'm nowhere near you two, but at least I've had the experience of trying to play through on guitar. And one of the things that happens to me is when it seems like it's working for me, I haven't really got a clue what I'm doing. I can sort of drop in. I go to C major or go to A minor. I can do that if I have to. But when I'm at my best, it's my ear leading the way. Now, I know you've got a ton more chops and more knowledge than me, but how much is that for you? Because I felt you were more like in my camp of it's your ear telling you where to go.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Like, I feel like playing a guitar duo is a very delicate environment, musical environment. It's a very fragile construct, right? Because you have two instruments carrying melody, harmony, and rhythm and form and all these things. Just by with two instruments, but both instruments are by themselves capable of carrying everything at the same time. So there's a lot of, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of permutations of how you can create a piece of music and distribute it over two instruments. So what I'm getting at is that this would only work in very few combinations of players. There are great players out there that I don't think I could play a duo with. It just wouldn't gel. And it works so well with Tom because I feel like we're opposite sides of the same coin. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
I thought
he's
this.
he's a legato player, I'm a picking player. He's he's a he's a more jazzy type, I'm a more rocking type. He's a shape based or a visual, not shape. That sounds false. He's a visually based player. I'm an
Yeah.
audio auditive based player. Um, and I feel like that works extremely well. So I don't think there is any sense of competition when we play. I hope
Oh,
that
not
that
at
comes
all, not
across.
at all. No, no, and also I felt that you both didn't feel that you needed to show off, even though you were in a room full of guitarists watching you. I felt that there was a stronger symbiosis between you that meant that you wanted to get to the music, and I think Tom seemed to be building up from below. You know, he looks at the harmonic structure and he builds up from below. And whereas you've got the blues, and
Mm.
so you go for blue notes and you go for bends and stuff. And
It's
so
also
those
very
things work
sorry.
very well together because there's certain points where you were both incredible ability to work through chord changes, and really
Mhm.
both of you are outlining those chord changes, but you're doing it almost all on the top because you've got a lot more bends, and Tom, you both cross over as well, but that seemed to be where the strength came from, is that you both had slightly different ways of outlining the structure of the tune, which of course the duo you have to do, is don't you, it's like you can't just start wailing anything because it's gonna, I mean, you spoke about that in the clinic, you know, outlining chord changes. I would find that really hard to do. That's a real master.
Yeah.
There's a live Schofield video when he's outside, he's got Dennis Chambers on drums and he's playing to these complex chords, and then suddenly the whole band stops and it's really kicking, and Schofield just steps forward and he plays his solo through the chord changes. And even though he's going outside and playing, he's not just arpeggiating it, but you never feel that you don't know the chords. You can hear him outlining the chords. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable when you see what he's doing.
Yeah, I remember I transcribed his famous intro to All the Things You Are in college. It's a similar thing. He carries the whole form, just playing by him, improvising by himself. I mean, that's just nuts. Um, yeah, so it's I feel like Tom, for instance, to get back to this point, he's a visual based player, meaning he's also tuned in fourths, right? So the beauty of that tuning is that it's kind of a bit more similar to the piano, is that every shape works across all strings in the same fashion. I think that facilitates that. Whereas first of all, with
What
that
happens if he
said,
wants to play Sweet Home Alabama?
well, he can't. It's just I actually
there are guitarists that will sacrifice that, and there's guitarists like you and me who won't, because we still want to be able to play Sweet Home Alabama.
I absolutely respect the guts that it takes to say goodbye to that, you know?
Yeah, God, I've
It's
thought about it loads. About 30 years on the guitar.
Yeah, but I still like my open E chord. I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
No
I just have to. And my
blues, like
box
pentatonic
blues
scales. Yeah.
cliches. Yeah, I have to do it occasionally. I just can't do without it. But mind you, he still has great ears. Like the ears still have to be at a minimum level. The like the shapes he plays are still strongly connected to the ear. Because you'll notice that when sometimes he walks down the street and then he starts scatting, and you realize, oh, uh, he's outlining Stella by Starlight there or whatever when he scats. And then the same way, I still have a very a visual based approach as well. But for me, the ear is a little bit on the heavier side, because there's occasions where I won't even think about the chord changes, and I won't think about the shapes too much, and I just play by ear. That happens too, where I just find the melody within the keys somewhere and just try to reach for the strong notes.
There's an album by Michael Brecker where he's playing with an orchestra. He's Klaus Ogerman did the arrangements, and when Brecker turned up, he looked at the chords that were written out they had to play through, and they were so dense that he could not do it.
Mm-hmm.
He said he didn't understand what was going on, so he plays through that entirely by ear. And if you hear it, it's just, it's all of these skills are incredible, and but this ear playing, and especially the way it relates to composition, because I think if you're an ear player, you are blighted by hearing stuff all day long. I've got that as well, is that I'm continually hearing stuff all day long. It's like and when I go to compose, it's just whatever I'm hearing at that time. A whole bunch of other things have passed by when I was in the shop, or driving the car, because I'm hearing I'm a bit more on the rhythmical side, but I hear certain rhythms related to certain harmonies, and I can hear them and they just do my head in. I've got them in my head. And so a lot of time when I sit down to compose, I'm not going, right, let's do something in A minor. I'm just going, what can I hear? And I find it on like a keyboard, and then I know what chords are going to go into it, and I'm almost discovering it as I do it. I'm going to go, well, what is this? I find the chord and go, oh, it's a G minor 7, or
There's an opportunity when that happens for me to come up with a really cool musical idea. Before I even touch an instrument, just sit down and try to almost meditate for a second and think about what is it that you truly want to hear? What is it that you truly want to express? The moment I turn on the amplifier and I plug it into the guitar, then I'll play a thing that is familiar to me, and you're already biased by that, right?
this is this. Well, I thought, what should we talk about? I thought, I don't know. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to talk about improvisation, but not from the theoretical, from actually the process of improvisation and how that relates to composition, because I believe that improvisation and composition are the same things.
100%. It's just the difference is the time aspect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there is a reason why a lot of great improvisers tend to not necessarily be great composers, or they don't compose much, because I feel like they have a fear of commitment, because they're so used to their ideas being a spur of the moment type of thing. They're very non-committal, right? I've played it, might never play it again. And with composition, obviously with improvisation, the challenge is that all these thought processes have to happen at the same time. So the mental load is just off the charts to be doing that at a high level. I mean, it demands your full attention, right? Whereas with composition, I think that the challenge is to be able to commit to an idea and understand that it's the best option.
But how do you know what the best option is?
experience, you know. It's just all experience. With I love DAWs for that stuff. Like I'm currently working on a tune, and I was just arranging around, like trying. Let's do the pre-chorus a half step higher, and just moving stuff around. And you can actually listen to all these options,
Yeah, I love
and then
that as
and then
well.
get to choose one. So. I tend to do demos for various options, and then choose for myself.
Yeah,
That's
I often find that the creative process, I believe I've got no actual artistic judgment. This is a real weird theory I have. When I'm actually creating, I'm just creating, and I've learned to not try and judge it artistically at that time. Go,
Mhm.
this is what's going down today, just get it down. So that's down. And then I'll leave it. I usually leave it, and then I'll open it up a couple of days later. And I'm often will go, I thought this was rubbish, but it's actually quite good. Or I thought this was really good, but it's actually rubbish. You know,
Mhm.
it's a because I think your judgment isn't there when you're creating. I think you're reacting to the world around you. And I think sometimes your reactions that can actually be quite bad, but they have to get out. You have to get them. You have to get them out. You know, it's like, and that's usually because you, like you said, there's cliches you'll go to, isn't there? You come, you hear one chord and you think, well, you know, I know what chord can come after this because I always put this chord after this, and there's all that you keep doing over and over again. But then again, I think, but maybe that's the color of, you know, that's the color of who I am. I mean, it's a player like Mike Stern. He's got very recognizable phrases that are really Mike Sterny, aren't they? And my mate BD Lenz, who has lessons with Mike, he says Mike can do anything. His knowledge of the guitar is vast. So Mike's obviously plays those licks because they're his licks, you know. So it's quite. I always find the whole creative process is a mystery. It's very hard to come up with any rule that works, you know.
To me, it's a bit funny. It's sometimes I feel like the guitar. Now, don't get this the wrong way. The guitar makes people a little stupid, and it's because the guitar is such a geometrical, such a visual instrument that people turn off their ears the moment they touch the instrument. Um, I know a couple of people, some of them famous, some of them just locals. You know, for example, guitarists who sing, songwriters, guitarists, singer songwriters. They'll have a chord progression. They'll come up with a melody over it as the singer that is incredibly beautiful. Let's say it's a progression in G major, and then they start playing a solo, and they noodle away mindlessly in the G minor box pentatonic. And and I'm just thinking to myself, well, it's like they use a different part of their brains, so they're not really listening anymore to what they're playing. They're just moving their fingers about because that's what a guitar solo is. You move your fingers around, and I wonder how do you come up with these amazing melodies as a singer, and then be so unmelodic on the guitar. And really, what I want to do is I want to be as intentional with the guitar as I am when I'm singing or writing vocal melodies, for instance. That's my whole thing. It's all what I want to do, whether that's improvisation or composition. I want it to be intentional. I don't want it to be a product of chance. If something is good, I want to know why it's good so I can reproduce it.
Yeah, I think this it's got to do with the history of rock music and the way it grows out of the blues. And I think if you listen to old blues players, like the really old acoustic blues players, they're not necessarily playing in a box. They're very tied to chord changes, and they outline the chords in a very virtuoso way, especially when they're playing bass lines and chords all at the same time. You know, Robert Johnson's doing.
Oh
He's
my
he's
God.
not just whittling
Yeah.
up and down a minor pentatonic scale, but I think when in the '60s when those sort of more white and usually British bands started to explore the blues, it's almost like a punk thing, is that musicians could buy a guitar, you know, play the minor pentatonic, and they could express themselves. And there was a time when that was really valid because it allowed a sort of generation that weren't classically trained to express themselves. And of course, when it comes to playing those pentatonic scales, you can play them really well or not play them really well. I mean, BB King plays them incredibly well. Eric Clapton plays them incredibly well, and there's all that side of it. But there's a point for me where you think, well, how much can that go on? And yet the guitarists, the sort of guitar world, they don't seem to question that. Like you said, it's like oh, it's an electric guitar, so it must do this. And so that all the guitarists that have explored other areas on the guitar, and they don't seem to be able to get any purchase in the sort of mindset of those people who always want to tell you that, oh, Dave Gilmour's the best guitarist, or Clapton, you know that sort of.
We have the same culture here. I mean, you go into a magazine store and you see the guitar magazines, the big SRV special, the big Rory Gallagher special. Oh, you mean like you've done for the last 30 years? And no, I mean, I love those two players,
Yeah,
right?
I do as well.
It's just we need to keep moving the instrument forward. It should also be in the interest of the music industry, the music instrument industry, to be moving these things for us, because those players will naturally become less known over time, and the generation that holds the money is going to be younger in the future. They're younger now. Those people who tend to pay the most money for instruments, and they need to have people to look up to. And
yeah, I'm starting to wonder whether the big problem for the guitar is the lack of opportunities for guitarists to play in a band that's playing songs. In terms of rock guitar, jazz guitar will always be there. There'll always be people who want to improvise, and I think that will always be there. There might be no audience for it, but I'm going to carry on playing. I'm going to, carry on playing. I try to play jazz guitar and jam and play, and I think musicians will not give that up. But the big event for me this year was the Extreme album and Nuno Bettencourt, because I mean Nuno's a fantastic guitarist. And when he emerged in the late 80s, early 90s, he was like a technical peak, wasn't he, in a certain way of guitar playing. But now he's been overtaken by guys like you and Matteo Mancuso and all these.
No way. No, he's still at the top. He's still at the top. He's still at the top. And
but
also,
but that Extreme album, it was like, I thought these solos are unbelievable. But they also play a part in the song. They take the song and take it from here and lift it up to here every single time, and that's Nuno's the master of that. And I think that is the big forgotten art with the guitar solo in terms of rock music, is how does this work in the song? Because all we've done is we've taken out all these guitar solos out of context. It's just a bunch of Instagram guys going, I can play this,
And now that you mentioned Instagram, I mean, Nuno recorded that stuff to tape in the 90s, and he didn't have 6,000 takes, and he didn't have digital buffing, so I still hold those guys from that generation to a different degree. And we tend to compare apples and oranges if we compare an Instagram video to that. It's not the same thing. The circumstances were different. It's like, it's a bit like comparing, people sometimes compare today's football players to the 70s football players. Oh, they would be outdoing them. Yeah, but you put today's football players into the circumstances of football players from the 70s, and they wouldn't be running circles around them. They simply wouldn't.
Well, I think this idea that those guitarists were having to create guitar solos that fitted into a composition. Mm-hmm. It's this idea of compositional guitar playing. This is one of the things that I think you're really interested in. I think that's where you're coming from. Not just blowing away on pentatonics really fast and doing all that stuff, which I'm sure you can do to the cows come home, but I'm really interested in this idea of compositional guitar playing and how improvisation relates to that. So when you listen to, say, Jimmy Page's solo on Stair to Heaven, or Brian May's solo on Bohemian Rhapsody, those solos they occupy a completely different space to, say, listen to Joe Pass or Alan Holdsworth. They're a completely different thing. And like you said, in the old days, these bands had a certain chemistry, and the guitarist would be working on a certain idea, and then they would get in the studio, they'd be all playing together, and these guitarists were able to pull this off live, and for these solos to stand up and for everybody to be playing them forever and ever, it's a incredible thing. And no one's in that situation. If you're in that situation now, you'd have it at home, wouldn't you? And you would have the set length, so you can't extend the length. It's all set, it's all rigid, and you'd be putting in it bit by bit, considering it phrase by phrase, which
yeah.
is a perfectly
So,
good way of working, you know.
yeah, but there is something that gets lost in that process, right? Um, th- I think that's why my session band videos are so successful because it's such a rare thing nowadays to see people play in a room together and feed off of each other, and
Could I
still,
say something?
but at the same time have a studio quality sound.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's what makes it unique.
Well, this is the thing about digital technologies. The incredible thing about them is it's so much easier to record people all in the same room. I imagine you're not even in a studio. You've pulled in the recording studio to where you are. I mean, the old days, it was like Led Zeppelin could do that if they borrowed the one man mobile off Rolling Stones and had it driven up outside some mansion somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, with digital technologies, you can find an interesting space. You can get in there and record like I mean, with Dante, you could do up to like 5,000 tracks all at the same time. You know, there's all these things out there at the moment technologically. And yeah, I agree. Your videos are brilliant because of the fact that there's a vibe there. They're really controlled. The camera's brilliant. It's all beautifully shot, but it's capturing something in the moment. And I just think that's getting lost from music.
Even like the word jamming. What does that mean to you? Oh, I jammed with this guy. We both had a track that we ripped off the internet, and we both set ourselves 16 bars, and we both sat at home, rehearsed the solo a million times, and then played 600 takes and edited the shit out of it. Then we put it together, crop it to a vertical format, and put it up on YouTube. And me sitting in Germany and the other guy sitting in Spain or whatever, and you put that together and then you call it a jam. And I feel like calling that a jam, where there's no element of improvisation, there's no element
Mm.
of interplay, none of that. It is, to me, has this, the word jam has completely lost its meaning, just like the word friend has lost its meaning when you have 5,000 friends on Facebook. It's, it's
That's an
that.
amazing comment there, Martin. I love that.
Mm,
Yeah, the word friend has lost its meaning and the word jam has lost its meaning.
yeah.
Yeah, that's profound. I really like that.
Mm.
I don't like it, but
It's true though,
yeah,
or
there
at least from our perspective, it's true. I mean, we've gained so many incredible things from digital technology and high-speed internet. It's fantastic, but we also lost some things. I There's a certain music label that shall go unmentioned that puts out a lot of rock music, and every time I scroll through my feed and I see a band come out on said music label. I listen to it and I hear the first time I hear the snare drum, and it's the same fucking sample over and over. I keep scrolling. I'm done. I'm not interested. It
this is why I got out of the prog world. It wasn't the only reason, but I got
yeah,
really frustrated by the production process. Right now, you know, in the old days, I made dance music. We had an Akai Samler and we had Cubase as just a sequencer, and we had a Mac that could record a couple of tracks. So we put the vocal on that, and everything was programmed. And I'm a big fan of electronic music, and I'm a big fan of all this stuff. Uh, but now I just feel that, especially in the realm of rock music, I don't. The fans do not realize what's actually going on. Does that make
no,
sense? I think they are assuming that they're listening to real drums and real players, and that, you know, there's nothing wrong in you saying, you know, that we make this music, this is how we make it. The drums aren't real; they're all virtual. I
yeah,
know it
but
sounds
that
like a real
it
drummer.
comes to the point where I recognize the drum libraries they're using. It's like, oh, it's that preset from that plugin. And it's like, I don't know. I wonder if it's just me because I know this that I keep scrolling and that actually the music is perfectly fine, and I just don't get it, I'm too knowledgeable about it. I'm too deep into the rabbit hole to be able to enjoy that as just an outsider. I don't know that. Maybe I'm the problem. So I'm happy to throw my hands up and admit that.
Yeah, I have the similar thoughts because I think my whole life, you know, I would buy like a Deep Purple album when I was a kid, and I'd take it and put it on. And what I was really getting off on was these guys in a room playing. That's why I bought live albums, because I was, you know,
Yeah.
that's what I was into, and that's what I want to hear. And
I
so
never
often,
liked I never liked the studio versions of Deep Purple as much as the live versions.
Well, that's why I picked them, because
Yeah,
specifically it was always the live albums are better for
absolutely.
Liverpool
With Deep
than
Purple, it's got to
studio.
be live. It's got to be live. It's the same. I mean, it's the same in metal. It's like metal is quantized to death, compressed to death, sample replaced to death, reamped to death, and it's funny because I think there's nothing that is less heavy than perfection.
That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, recently I've hooked up with Shane Embury from Napalm Death, and I've been going over there, and we have been sort of discussing the possibility of doing something together, because he's a big prog fan as well. That's the heaviest band on the planet, and they still work the stuff out, rehearse it up, go in a studio and play together. And Danny Herrera, their drummer, that guy's a metal genius, that bloke, because that's all real. You know, it's not triggered, because my drum tech is their drum tech. You know, he sits there tuning those bass drums to get them to sound exactly the same and really, really heavy. And Danny's really playing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you can hear it when you hear Napalm Death. It sounds like it's taking your face off. It's unbelievably heavy.
It's with those modern like tech death bands. I really love their compositional approaches. I think they come up with some incredible stuff. But to me, it's always a little bit funny because it's music that basically is carried by the fact that the players involved are virtuoso, right? That is the highest selling point of the music, but at the same time, that music is not recorded live, so the performance isn't really honest. So I don't know. It's a bit of you're selling a bit of a fake product, you know. If the virtuosity is the selling point, but the virtuosity is created artificially, in to some degree, I
Yeah,
find.
but the thing, I've given this a lot of thought, as you know, and what do you feel about someone who's done 150 takes and then pick the best?
I know, because my friend is a guy named Jake Wilson, is a UK guitar player, who said the biggest edit you're ever gonna make is choosing a take. So yeah, where do you draw the line?
It's a bit like throwing a basketball over your head and it goes through the basket. If you've done it, you know, 300 times that day,
Yeah.
and then you film it and put it out, and everyone goes, "Oh wow," but you can't actually do it, but it's real. And so the whole recording process, in a way, is sort of fake. But so it's very hard to actually pinpoint. I think one of the problems I have is, I don't even know if I know if that's the case. When I was recording and all this digital technology was coming in, and I didn't feel like my drumming was on the records anymore, you know, and that was a real issue with Million Town by Frost. You know,
Yeah.
I spent, 2 or 3 days in the studio recording all of that. And what happened is the record company didn't like my drum sounds, because they got used to the drum sounds of the demo.
Do you still have those, by the way? I'd be really interested in listening
No,
to it.
I want there is a video that I put in my Patreon. If you search through
Mhm.
of a video was taken in the studio, you can hear my drumming on it raw, because I leave, and then John Mitchell and Jem listen to the track Million Town, and you can hear my drumming raw, not even mixed, just coming out the speakers. But I remember Jem contacted me and he said, they don't like your snare drum, they want the old snare drum. So he then replaced all the sounds. And because of that, Jem's got an incredibly vicious, like, mixing process. He calls it mixing, but he really edits the drums down. You know, he'll find the best bar in that verse, and he'll cut that out and he'll put that all the way through. You know,
Oh.
he might, when he's got other drummers, he might not do that to them, but he definitely did it to me a lot, and it was probably because I'm crap.
Yeah, I mean, with that stuff, it's really, where do you draw the moral line, right? Is a second take for a classical musician, a second take would be questionable.
Yeah.
For somebody else, tuning is where auto tuning is where you draw the line. For somebody else, is AI vocals are the line. And then there will be a whole generation of musicians that is totally fine with using AI musicianship which is going to become.
Well, I'll confess, on my albums, when I do a guitar solo, I'll play through it, and I don't like doing loads of takes because I lose the vibe and I'm just not playing right. So I want to capture those early takes. So when I feel I've got the vibe down, that's the take. Then I go into autotune or the
Yeah.
pitch correction, and any notes that I didn't like, I repitch. And what that the freedom for that is, it means I can sit down and play and just go for it. And when now I hit a bum note, I don't go, oh my God, I've hit a bum note, just hit stop. Because I would get into a trap where the takes were getting shorter and shorter. Because with out of tune notes, you could actually get to the point where going, oh, it's not out of tune, but it's not the one I wanted. And then you get to the point where, well, it's the one I wanted, but now I actually don't want it. And you find the take getting shorter. So now I just go for it. If I hit a note like, no, I just go, fix that and then keep playing. And so in a way, that technology is enabling me to capture something real, but not get like me get all depressed that I hit a really horrible note halfway through it, you know. And so it's a very strange thing, isn't it, this digital technology? You know, the Beatles, I did the Beatles reaction last night, and I've got into a little bit of trouble because for me, scraping Lennon's voice off that tape, the software that they've used, speeding it up, stretching it so it fits to something that's got a click, and then obviously he was out of tune, and then putting him all into you know, tuning him in. I don't know whether you could class that as Lennon's vocal. And I've said this, and then the marketing behind it, they say, no, it's just been uncoupled. I go, man, yeah, but it's been uncoupled. You understand what's going on? It's not like being physically audio using phase uncoupled. It's in the digital domain. That voice they can do whatever they want. They can stretch notes out, pull it in, retune it. And so there's this big thing on Lennon's on the track and George Harrison's on the track. And I'm like, well, are they?
Very interesting. I had one of my favorite songs to come out in the last couple of years is the song "Everything's Electric" by Liam Gallagher. I don't know if you've heard it. Incredible song. It's co-written by Dave Grohl, I believe. Incredible. One of the best choruses I've heard in my entire life. But they committed the cardinal sin and they auto-tuned Liam Gallagher's voice. And you know, I usually am into really polished singers, high technical level singers, but I freaking love Liam Gallagher singing. And he does all those things your voice teachers will tell you not to do, and he gets away with it, and that is incredible to me. There's some natural ability to that guy to convey something in his singing. And you remove that by tuning him because nobody sounds better when he's slightly off pitch than Liam Gallagher. There's an art to sounding great when you're off pitch, and he's got that. And part of his sound and his aesthetic is being slightly off pitch, and that song is pitch corrected. And I always listen to the live version because that's a million times better. There's so much rawness and grittiness to the vocal performance that they've removed from the studio version. Somehow, I don't know who is in the chain of production. Somehow they feel they need to do that, and I don't understand why. I don't understand it.
15 years ago, when I was recording the IQ album Frequency, and that was probably the biggest budget I bet, because was in the studio for days and days. Normally when I make an album, I was in for 2 days, but this was like weeks, you know, recording drums. And we were doing 20 passes of each section, you know, and then they were picking the best takes. And then once they assembled that take together, I can remember we'd finished one song, the first song. I go to make myself a cheese sandwich. And I walk back in and they're quantizing it all. And I was going, what are you doing? They go, we're quantizing it all. I said, but I played in time. They said, yeah, but we always do. We're just going to quantize everything anyway, just to make sure. And I was like, say, you don't need to do that. And because I was in the band, I was a band member, they didn't. And I think it's the opening section of the first track is quantized. The rest isn't. You can hear that. And I thought that was really odd because they weren't doing it because I'd played badly. They were just doing it because that's the production sound. And it's one of these things. Once everybody's doing it, you have to do it, don't you? Because your stuff will stick out. It's like compressing everything too hard in the you know, everyone's trying to be louder, more in time, more in your face, and all these types of things.
It's Steve Lukather said a thing to the extent of, it's like, you know, back in the day we recorded everything to tape and released it as is, and nowadays these bands go in and they fix their stuff digitally and they tighten it up to the point where they make us sound like a school band in comparison. So it's now funny
I
that
think that's true.
the best players now sound quote unquote worse.
I don't
Just
think
like,
that's true. I've got the stems to Rosanna,
yeah.
and I did a try to do a copy of it on my channel, and when you listen to Jeff Porcaro's drum part isolated, you just can't believe that person. It's unbelievable. All of
Yeah,
them are incredible.
even some older Dream Theater stuff, you know, prog has this negative connotation that everything is too perfect and too polished. You listen to some stem tracks from like Scenes from a Memory, and in between the stopped notes, you can hear the springs in John Petrucci's guitar resonate and stuff like. And that is so cool. That would be just getting doctored out nowadays, but it adds so much character to the sound.
But I think you said something really interesting earlier on. Is that I think the thing with this discussion is you gain something and you lose something, and I could be the old man shaking my fist at the cloud, moaning about this. But the fact is, I have a recording studio in my garden,
Hmm.
and it's got as many tracks as I like. My drum kit's all mic'd up. I've got a guitar plugged in that goes into this box which emulates any amp I want, and it sounds like a real guitar. You know, I don't have to mic that up. Same in my bass. I've got a billion keyboard sounds because I've got a MIDI keyboard, and I can make records in my garden for free. I've currently got 10 mics on my drum kit.
Hmm.
10. You know, if I go to a real recording studio, that's a lot of time to get all that working, but I've been able to do that. You know, I've got 3 mics on my bass drum, 2 on the snare at the moment. You know, and I've got all powered mics on my kit at the moment as well, because I've been able to spec that. And you know, I'm gonna upgrade the audio interface, because I think that's what's pulling it back now, and that's what's the cost of that. It ain't £250,000 like it used to be, you know. So that's incredible. I can record stuff, I can put it out online, I can have people connect with it straight away all over the world. In 1992, I remember I made a demo, and I had like 50 cassette tapes made, and most of them probably sat in my garage, and I gave away about 10.
Hmm.
You know, 10 people had that cassette. And now you could reach this audience, you know, so there's all these positives. But I think the big problem with digital technology is that artists have to be perfectionists by the very definition. We all are. And I think the perfectionism is rooted in self-loathing. That's where the psychological problems come from. This is one of the big messages of my site, which I think is a
I know,
powerful
yeah.
one. You know, we don't like ourselves. And so when you pick up the guitar, you pick up the drumsticks, you're always putting it through a quality system which is too harsh, and it forces you to get good. And the opposite, this is why when you watch X Factor and the singer gets up and they can't sing, you don't laugh because they can't sing. You laugh because they think they can. It's the opposite. And
It's the
so
opposite, yeah.
we all have a level of, I'm terrible. I have a level of perfectionism, which is at a point when I go into the studio and record my drums and I go and listen to the take, they sound absolutely unlistenable.
Yeah.
And I have a panic. It
Yeah.
sounds unlistenable. And then it takes a couple of years to be able to put on a record I recorded in the old days. I was actually all right then. But at the time, I'm unlistenable.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Do you have that?
Yeah, like I wish there was some kind of drug or a pill or whatever that could detach you from that for like an hour or two, so you could listen back to your stuff with an outside perspective.
But do
Like,
you
man,
have that, Martin? Because to me, as
it's
a
brutal.
guitarist,
It
you are
gets.
Mr. Perfect. You play. I've seen you play, and everyone said this about you. And I think you first got the name because you, in the old days of the internet, you were able to stick your Sony Ericsson phone up and basically play your solo and never go wrong. You know, you are a one take guy. You know, so
Never, not in the studio, never. And it gets to the point where, yeah, where I do have a bit of an unhealthy relationship with my main instrument, which is the guitar.
what about your voice? Is that different?
It's
You have
different. It's different because with the voice, I allow myself to suck. I don't have the same expectation to my voice. With the voice, I'm a beginner. I've only sung for 7 years, so I accept that. And nobody expects me to be great at singing. If I suck at singing, everybody's like, yeah, well, he's a guitar player, so who cares? So I feel like there's more leeway with the singing, but the guitar stresses me out more. When I get on stage, I'm never ever nervous about the singing. I'm always nervous about the guitar playing.
we really are getting to something brilliant here.
Mm.
with this, because what my next question for you would be, how much do you think this perfectionism is rooted in you, like as a driving force that's always been there, and how much of it is based upon the expectation of the audience? Because you're a monster guitar player. I'm telling you, you're a monster guitar player. And I'm sure when I say that, you don't go, oh, I'm so pleased, because Andy knows his stuff. You go, oh, yeah,
I go, yeah, he doesn't know what he's
you
talking
are a
about.
monster guitar player, Martin. Honestly, I'm telling you now, you got nothing to worry about.
I'm so torn between God complex and imposter syndrome. Like, and there's this constant push and pull between these two extremes. It's very hard for me to accept compliments like that. It's because there's something in me that doesn't fully believe them. Um, what was the question again?
You know, how much do you think the perfectionism is
Oh
rooted
yeah,
in you, say, from birth, and how much is it the expectation of the audience that's sitting there? It's Martin Miller, come on then, arms folded, you know.
it's childhood stuff, I believe. There was I'm going to tell you a bit of. You're going to turn this into a therapy session now.
That's where
There
it should
was
end up.
there was uh, there was this channel called Premiere in Germany, which is German for premiere, and it was a channel that you had to buy like a receiver for, and you had to have a satellite connection. Otherwise, it would be like
I remember it. I used to have it myself. Yeah, lots of
otherwise you
music
would
on
get
that
just
stuff.
a gray fuzzy image. Anyway, they did this thing where they showed a whole Pink Floyd show um, for free. You could watch the thing for free, and we VHS recorded it. It was like an overnight thing. It was, I think it was somewhere in Italy that they played the Pulse tour '94, so I was 9 years old. And my father VHS recorded the whole thing, and then we watched it. We watched. This was the kind of thing where I didn't have access to a ton of stuff, right? I had that one VHS and I watched it a million times over. So I watched the Pulse tour, that concert, a million times over. And there was that intro to "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," and obviously it's just the pad sound of the keyboards, and there's that one guitar note that gets bent up, and David Gilmour's hand must have been a little bit sweaty because he glides off that bend, and there's an open G string that goes bop for a second, and then it gets put through the delay, goes like bop 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 bop, bop, and the whole audience starts cheering like crazy because it was such an obvious mistake in the most exposed moment that it
Mm.
could possibly be happening in it. And my father was cracking up about it. He was like, "Ha, that's so awesome!" The reason he was happy, he was not poking fun at David Gilmour. He was happy to see him being human, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that is something you never get to see ever, really. And that happened. He was really happy about it. And my father would bring up that story for a decade plus. Like still at family gatherings or whatever, when we were talking about music. Remember that time when David Gilmour played that wrong note and the audience started cheering? It was like 10 years later, he still talks about that. And I was like, that instilled a thought in me that my fingers can glide off of a string that is the smallest moment in time that can happen. You have no control over it, and people will be talking about this for decades. And that put me in a really negative spiral of thought. And I think that was the first memory of me thinking, getting into a spiral like that. And obviously, it gets so much worse through social media and people holding up their phones. Like I want to try something on stage that is really risky, but there's a phone right in my face. And some people also have no sense of border. I feel like there's been moments on tour where people were literally holding up their phones into my face for a whole 2 minute solo. And it's like, what am I gonna do?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I don't know if you know, you might have known this, but the people watching it might not. My first drum clinic was with Simon Phillips, and turned up, I'm playing with Simon Phillips. We sound check, we go backstage, I'm on first, and I start getting panicky for the very reasons you're saying. You know, I'm thinking, this isn't like a gig. If I'm having a bad gig, I can't just go on like 20% and just play the songs. I've got to do solos and fills, and if I can't, and I start to panic, which is the pressure you're under. The fact of being a guitarist out on tour where people come to see your guitar, so you can't say, "Oh, I won't do any solos today. I'll just play the songs."
Yeah.
I'll just a few blues pentatonics, and so I started to panic. And so I went, look at the stage, because when you look at the stage, you see the reality of it. It's supposed what's in your mind, and it makes you feel better. And I've done this many times before. So I walked down to the side of the stage and I look. Simon Phillips' huge drum kit, my tiny little jazz kit next to it, the spotlight on, ready for me to go on. And then 1,000 people in the audience with Zildjian t-shirts on with their arms folded. And I went into a panic. So there's no one backstage, there's no band. It's just me and Simon in his dressing room. So I went up and knocked the door to Simon Phillips, who is my idol. And then Simon said, oh, Andy, is it? I went, yeah. He goes, come on in. What's are you all right? And I went, no, I'm having a panic. I'm having a panic, Simon. It was like I had to go to Simon to get to, and he was incredible because he told me 3 things that have stuck to me for this day.
Okay.
He said this. He said, firstly, Andy, he said, what are you here to do? Play the drums or play music? He goes, I suggest you go out and play some music. Right? He then said, and he goes, the thing you're going to want to try and do when you get out there is you're going to want to play everything you can do. He says, if you're any good, and he goes, I believe you are a reasonable drummer, you won't be able to do everything tonight. So just do something and make it musical. And he said, when you start to play, this is the 3rd thing, he said, imagine it's like there's an intensity meter. So when you start to play, the meter comes up. He says, once it gets to about there, he said, push it back down.
Oh, wow.
And then let it come up and push it back down. And I did this, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I thought, I'm going to play something. So I'm going to start off with the Rosanna beat. So I walked out to the stage, because it was open solo was the first thing, and I just went into the Rosanna beat, which I thought was quite funny because, so I'm going, and I'm sat there thinking, what shall I do? Well, Simon said, notch it down. So I just stopped. So I went, little clap, came back in, played, stopped, and they got it, and they really started to clap. And as when they clapped, I suddenly thought, oh, this is working. And at that point, I kept the pressure on, but it was as though I accessed the pressure, and I played amazing on that one. I mean, most clinics I did were always like, I'm sure you've had this, where you just feel like you're tired and stressed, and they're all looking at you, and you're trying to play as fast as you possibly can, and you're tense. I've been there a million times, but that I played, and my final solo was a solo in 15, 16, and I went berserk on it. And I remember finishing, and I turned around to walk off, and Simon was sat there clapping and going, "Oh my God!" And I thought, God, well, that's you, Simon, because you told me the secret. And after that, it was always so hard to quite access what he told me. But I believe those 3 things are very wise things. Always play music. Don't try and play everything you can do, and notch it down rather than trying to push it up. And it's very hard in the situation you're in to do that, because they're all wanting to see you blow them away, aren't they? But it's zen, isn't it? The only way to really blow someone away is by trying not to blow them away.
That's the
what
irony.
Dave Gilmour did on that video. That's the thing you really should have got from it.
It's the psychology of was it reverse effort, or what is it called? Yeah. The thing is, you could tell me those 3 things, and like with the struggles I have, you could tell me those 3 things, and in my mind I would come up with counter arguments the moment you tell them to me.
Go on, give some counter arguments. Then go on.
Well, yeah, well, okay, play music. Well, music is hard to play. Don't just play something. Well, the audience is not going to be content with just something. And was the 13 push the intensity meter down? Well, what if I can't? What if it overpowers me? So there's already 3 arguments.
Well, that's
in my
what
head.
he said. If you push the meter down, you'll be able to access this and play in an intense way, because playing intense is actually being on top of it with the pressure cushion. You're like that's and I know that we all know that feeling. It's like that magical thing when you pick the guitar or you pick the sticks up and you start playing. You go, oh my God, this is all going really well, and you almost feel like you're trying to hold yourself back. That's. But I think the thing about playing music as a guitarist, it's phrasing. I think sometimes, I think you're not like this. You're brilliant at this when I listen to you, but you've got to focus on phrasing. You've got to play things that make musical sense. You can't just sacrifice that for speed or tricks and stuff like this. And I think when people play fast, it's often the fact that they play fast but get out of it. I think it's the entrance and the exit especially that's really important. you know. So, and that's phrasing again. So it's better to play slower but exit correctly and then just blast up and down the guitar and then end up in a, this is what happens to me when I play fast. I start off and I go off on a tangent and then suddenly go, where the hell am I? So I'm
Yeah,
like that cartoon character that's run off the end of the pier.
that stuff only works if it's a natural part of your playing. The problem is with speedy stuff is that it has to be rehearsed and pre-learned to a degree, right? You have
Oh, of
to,
course, yeah.
it has to be something you study in isolation and then take to the bandstand. And as soon as you have this sense of this person is now stopping the actual playing to shoehorn something in and then get back to the actual playing, that's when it sticks out negatively. And to be able to weave in and out of technically advanced ideas, that is really the art, is to interweave that
And I think
with
that's what
the
Simon
natural
means
way.
by playing music. Is that whatever you do, you've got to think of the musical context. Because I have students come around, I go play something on the drums, and they'll do a cool beat, and then they go into a lick off YouTube, and they've got it down. It sounds amazing, and I think, yeah, but it just sounded terrible because what I was listening to, it shouldn't have gone there,
Hmm.
you know. And I'll go, why don't you just do this? And I'll go like, but don't get on. I think that's where you're at the moment. You know, it's like that fill you've got is for when the intensity is so high, and then you've got to put it in the right place. And I think this idea of being, you know, what is musical, and what musical is having a conversation that makes sense, is you've got to say something and then follow it up with something else. And I'm
I
not
mean,
too sure how much educationally the things we're talking about now are stressed because they're harder to teach, aren't they?
drums are the perfect example for this, I feel like, because with drums, there are technically insanely adept drummers that when they play a quote unquote simple regular beat, it sounds awful. Like the tier levels for playing, you can tell whether that's a beginner or a world class drummer just by listening to that. And not only that, even within world class drummers, there's such a gap in skill between those things. And it's the same for guitar players. And I feel like I've learned that through the drums, through observing drummers. I've played with some very high tech drummers who I didn't enjoy playing as much with as lower tech drummers. And it's for that reason. And with guitar players, for instance, so I've talked about this in my video about playing fast. When you play fast, you need to, and this applies to the drums as well. You need to you need to access a different part of your brain, right? It's a different neurological process to play fast because you cannot process every single motion individually. You have to process them at the same time. And so what happens is that you group four notes, let's say, depending on the tempo and on the subdivision you play, you group four notes into one thought. That thought turns into four motions that are controlled by one thought. And what happens is you start treating four notes, packages or chunks of four notes as one thing. And that works really well for playing fast. The problem is that that mentality bleeds into playing slow. So these guitar players start treating each individual note that they play in the exact same way. And the notes start getting homogenized. Every note has the same attack. Every note has the same vibrato or lack of vibrato. Every note is played with the same articulation, the same intent. Whereas the really great players, they play every note like it's their last. Every note is taken care of. It's paid special attention to. How do you attack the note? How do you release the note? When exactly on is the note on the grid, and when does it end? And playing fast is in a sense counterproductive to that. And I've actually talked to my friend Sebastian Lanza, who's the drummer on my record, about this, and he said I've I've stopped practicing blast beats so much because I felt like my groove was suffering a little bit. Right?
Oh
I don't
God,
know if
there's so much in that. I mean, you're talking about this is about where it's about. There's so much in that, you know, in terms of. I mean, in terms of the drums, I think when if you get some sort of semi-professional professional experience as a drummer, as soon as you get into that world, you realize that the band is not interested in how fast you are. What they're interested in is your sound and groove, because they want to sit on top of that, and they also want to feel confident. This is a big thing, that they want to feel confident that you're driving them. So, you know, if you're going to a chorus and a drummer, you know that if the drummer knows he's going to the chorus, you could, the best of the band, go, we definitely go to the chorus now because I can feel it. So that's another thing a drummer does. And I learned this by being on stage, and especially with Robert Plant when I was doing the big gigs, and you feel like you're trying to communicate a drum beat to, like, I mean, some of the gigs were like 50,000 people I did in the old days. And you sit there looking at that crowd, and all you've got is bunt, bunt. So you start playing like that, and also you have to feel the big, you know, you have to feel up the energy, which I think these are all skills that never get discussed on the drums. Now,
No.
I've got a friend called Mark Shulman, and Mark Shulman's a fantastic drummer. He drums for Pink, and he's a big session drummer. And I once said, how did you get all these sessions? And he said, well, he said, in the old days, he said, I got offered an audition with Bad English, which was I think Jonathan Cain's band from Journey. And he said he went to this audition, and he started to play, and he said Jonathan Cain stopped. He went, you're dragging, or you're rushing. He said, you're rushing. He went, oh, sorry. So he started up again, and then a few minutes later he stops. He goes, you're rushing. You're not here, you're rushing. And he goes, oh, okay then. The third time, Jonathan Cain just stops. He reaches into his bag, he gets a metronome out and throws it at Mark Shulman, and it hits him on the chest, and he grabs it, and he goes, you can have that, take it home and come back when you can play in time. And Mark said he walked out absolutely dejected, and he said he decided, what am I going to do? You know, oh, this is my career, what am I going to do? And he decided to do what Jonathan Cain said. And so for a year, he clapped along to that metronome at 40 BPM. And I remember we were sat sound checking for a clinic, and he goes, and I said, well, what do you get from that? And he went, this, and he went, and it sounded like a drum loop. I was like, whoa. And that is your bread and butter as a drummer. And I'm okay at it. I'm not like these, you know, like a Steve Gadd, or like in the UK we've got Ash Sohan, and his grooves, bizarre. It's just ridiculous. I got more chops than Ash, right? I know I have, but I cannot get anywhere near that. Every time he puts a video up on you know, Instagram, I'm so like in awe of what he's doing.
Have you seen Aaron Sterling? I think he's the John Mayer drummer. It's absurd. The guy also knows how to get incredible drum sounds. Like, he uses different recording techniques on all his videos, and also like session band drummer Felix Lehrmann. He's like the king of that stuff. You know, he's got the fusion chops as well. He's got these Dennis Chambers and Vinny Colaiuta chops, but he's the freaking king at just laying it down. And the same, when I was at Rick Beato's show, he broke down, I think, I'm the Walrus by the Beatles, and he isolated the drum track. And I was like, you cut out 4 bars of that, and you have a hip-hop smash hit, a 90s hip-hop smash hit.
No one understands what Ringo could do. He was like a machine. You watch that Get Back documentary, he's banging out perfect drum sound, perfect drum grooves, perfect for the song, and interesting. He doesn't go for the obvious bum clap, bum bum clap. He'll go for really interesting things. But that guy's like a machine. And the reason is because I think so many drummers wanted to sound like Ringo. So the sound of great drumming is the sound of Ringo. And then people say, oh, he wasn't that great a drummer, and there was better drummers in the Beatles. And it's absolute nonsense. He was unbelievable.
I'll do you one better. I'll now make a case for Lars Ulrich. Because like in the rock and metal world, nobody gets bashed more than Lars Ulrich. I mean, have you listened to the Black Album? How incredible the drumming on that is. It's absurd how good it is. And also, when I hear Metallica in my head, when I imagine Metallica playing, that slight speeding up during the drum fill and coming back down is a part of their sound. You replace that, because you have all these covers of of people making, let's do a song in the style of Metallica, and they use a drum machine and they have it quantized into a metronome, and I feel like it sounds nothing like Metallica. Sorry, this doesn't sound like Metallica. Lars Ulrich is the Metallica sound together with James Hetfield.
But yeah, and the thing is, right, when Master of Puppets came out, okay, we were all into metal and we were playing new wave of British heavy metal, so I could go boom, 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 you know, I could do one of those. That Master of Puppets came out, was recorded on tape. There's no trickery. They might have cut sections together, but it's recorded on tape. There were no drummers I knew who could play the drumming on that. Lars Ulrich had pushed drumming into an area, and Charlie Benante did it, and Dave Lombardo, that they all pushed drumming into an area that nobody had gone into, and that most drummers could not do it. And then there was a whole generation that grew up learning that, and now kids can do it, and they look to it, you know. And this is why I supported Eric Clapton on my channel so much, because I felt like going, you know, everyone's bashing Eric, and he came so low on that list, on the 250 list. But rock guitar playing is Eric Clapton. It's not Jeff Beck, it's not Jimi Hendrix, it's not Richie Blackmore, it's not Jimmy Page. It's Eric Clapton. He did it 65, right? And everyone started to play like that, and that thing, and it's the thing you're talking about playing in the pentatonic box, but Eric's brilliant at it, and he's
no, man, there's tiers of playing in the pentatonic box.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people. I was the first guy to just bash people who would play the pentatonic box and like, oh, it's all the same. I remember sitting, being age 17, a friend of mine puts on a Stevie Ray Vaughan VHS, and at the time I was already massively into John Petrucci and Steve Morse. And he puts on Stevie Ray Vaughan, and because I recognized the pentatonic box and the shapes that he plays, I was like, this guy sucks. I can do this. And now, the older and the more experienced I get, I understand I am nowhere near ever being that good. And it's like Stevie Ray Vaughan is such a force of nature. The level of command he has. I did not have the intellect and the ear to understand what he was doing. I thought I had it figured out because I could look at it at a surface level and recognize something in that. And that's why I thought I understood it. And that was foolish.
There's a touch on his guitar. He's got a touch which is vicious, isn't it? It's brutal, that no one else has got. The only guy that I would say has got a similar type of touch, and this will sound bonkers, is Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah, I see that.
Yngwie Malmsteen attacks that guy. I was watching him the other day and I thought, my God, that guitar sound is not that overdriven. It's like quite a plinky plonky stratty sound. That's all in his hands, and he's pulling a incredible attack on the guitar. And you know,
there's a few guys who have that sort of ferocity. Listen to Eric Gales. He has that. Phillips Says has that sort of thing. Art Meneses, Joe Bonamassa has it, Josh Smith has it. There are a bunch of guys who have it, but the first guy to do it was him.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, and I think this is all. I mean, we've just done an hour and a half. Shall we? Shall we finish up there? I've got to go to a gig. Actually, I've got my tech coming over.
Retention at this point is probably.
Oh, come on! Well, what we'll do is we're right at the end of the video. So anyone who is right at the end of this video, we will put a secret message in. So see if you saw it, if you've seen it to the end, then I want you to post in your favorite guitar player.
Okay.
We'll come up with you know, the 14 people that left watching it. We'll see. So what's your favorite guitar player? Who's your favorite guitar player?
Mine?
Yeah, today.
Today I'll say Steve Morse.
Oh, I missed out on Steve Morse, you see. It's one of my. Need to check that guy out. No, I haven't listened to enough.
Incredible. Dixie Drags, man. 70s Dixie Drags.
I know. So I get people haven't gone on my channel because I don't know enough about Dixie Drags. I need to go and check them out.
You're gonna go on YouTube now and watch the Bash live at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And it's gonna blow your mind.
Oh, he's a monster. The picking monster, that bloke. He's got a vicious attack. Martin, it's been lovely talking to you. We've got to do this quite regularly because
absolutely, man. Anytime.
And then you never know, you might be able to build up your own following for chatting.
I got to do a second.
You'll be on my channel, you see.
Yeah. I can let out all my controversial opinions on your channel.
So they're not controversial. They're brilliant. I really enjoy that, Martin. It's been interesting to not have any bounds. We've been all over the place, but I think it
all started with the kebab, and it ends with the kebab.
So I better go and get ready for my tech coming around. I'm taking my big fusion kit. I'm working on a big fusion kit at the moment, and I've got a covers gig tonight at
Free
a
bass drums
hall.
and a gong.
No, it's I've
No.
no, but I got two Chinas, Terry Bozzio style
All
each
right.
side, and my tech. So my tech can sort it out. We're going to take the gig to we're going to take the gig to this covers gig. He did it before a few months ago. I had a jazz gig with BD Lens, and I turned up with this kit with toms all around. You know, and the jazz guys didn't know what it was going on.
I think that's what a lot of guys are missing. Like me as an outsider, as a non-drummer, I feel like if I were a drummer, I would make sure that I have a really iconic, recognizable setup. You got to see the drum kit and be like, wow, that's XYZ.
Well, I saw Terry Bozzio on the Jeff Beck tour in 1990, and I remember walking into that venue, and his kit was on stage, and it was black. It was huge, but it was black. The drums were black, the heads were black, the stands were black, the cymbals were black, even the little washers that were on that you know, everything was black. And I remember the anticipation. And then Bozzio walked out, no shirt on, nipples pierced, chains between, thing that hair tied up. It was unbelievable. When he started to play, of all the drummers I've ever seen live, the one that just took me out was Terry Bozzio on that Jeff Beck tour. God, because it was beyond just, he was a virtuoso, but it's the show of it was just incredible. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's the Paganini thing. Paganini had that diabolic appearance about himself.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but we're going to be off on another hour and a half.
All right, anyway, yeah.
Martin, lovely to speak to you. We're going to do this quite regularly.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
I know you're a superstar guitarist. I don't want to impinge on your time so much, you know.
No. I'm having fun. This is where I get my social needs met. It's all good.
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm going to stop recording now. Thank Martin for doing this. Lovely.